So today I want to welcoming Johnny Ehrling and Max Groos, our two experts. And first of all, I just want to introduce both of them. So Johnny Ehrling, during a long period of time, he was a correspondent for different German newspapers in Beijing, China, and he is interested in this country for about more than 40 years. Moreover, he wrote several books about China, and you can definitely say that he is a China expert. So thanks for coming, and nice to meet you. Meet you here. And our other expert is Max Groos. He's a good friend of mine. He studies architecture at the TU in Munich, and he went for his studies 1 year to Shanghai, China. And since September, he is currently living there, and so he was directly affected by the crisis and its consequences in China. And also, thank you for coming and to share your personal point of view about the situation in China. And maybe we can start with a more general view. So if you want to, Johnny Ehrling, you can start to give us some information.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That's a great honor for me. And also, I like to be a little bit broader in my starting remarks. Because these days it's very difficult to work as a journalist in China, and it was much less difficult in the 2 periods when I worked as a journalist in China, especially from the time from 1985 to 1990, and the second time 1998 to 2000 to the end of 2019. So that makes altogether more than 25 years as a journalist. Even 30 years. And I experienced at that time as a reporting journalist, a lot of big events like student revolts, the Tiananmen massacre, the SARS virus outbreak in 2002 and 2003, which is similar to the Corona outbreak, although the Corona outbreak is a pandemic. And the big financial crisis in 2008 and the earthquakes and everything that. But never have journalists been, also we were always harassed and it was always problematic to work in a country like China, but never were journalists so restricted and harassed as in the last 2-3 months since January. Alone 19 United States correspondents were kicked out, as correspondents of big United States newspapers like New York Times and Wall Street Journal, were kicked out since January. And in 3 batches. And it was totally different to the 8 cases in the years before that I experienced. And it was, the Chinese side always argued this is a tit for tat. Actually, also Chinese journalists are harassed in the United States. But it's, if we go into in details, it is not comparable. But you can see it like Matt Pottinger, the former AP correspondent and now the Deputy National Security Advisor of the White House. He is also a China specialist, was writing just a month ago. He said, now there are more foreign reporters expelled in recent months from China than the Soviet Union expelled over decades. And that's really a sign. And Matt Pottinger was writing a commemoration piece on the 4th of May movement 1919 in China, which was initiated by students, and a very important changing point for the new patriotic movement in China with the demand of democracy and science. It was really a sort of cultural revolution at that time for modernization. But Matt, who wrote that, was attacked in Beijing by his interpretation of this movement for a simple reason, because the Chinese Communist Party was founded in 1921, just 2 years after the 4th May movement. And since that, it claims a part of legitimation of power of this movement and not on democracy and not on science. So, and 2021, the next year, will be a very important time in China because the Communist Party will celebrate 100 years founding and will put it as the first of 3 steps to become a world power. The next step is in 2035, when there will be a digital world power. That is our item also today. And to 2050, it will be military, everything a world power, and then it will left the United States behind it. So this is very highly symbolic. But in the moment, all these plans, and that is why I said I will be a little bit broader, they are in jeopardy. Why? Because mainly because of Corona and before. Before Corona, China was also in a state of problems. Enormous unemployment has been now made much worse through the Corona. At least 100 million people are in the moment without work, and this was stated recently 2 days ago by Premier Li Keqiang. He had an interesting figure to tell us. He spoke to the People's Congress in Beijing, and he said that now 600 million of the 1.4 billion people of China are living on a monthly salary of not more than 1,000 yuan, which is around 150 euro. So Corona brought back the question of poverty in China, which looked like being solved more or less. But China is now in a lot of trouble. And before the outbreak of Corona, China's economy and society were also very much stressed. Falling growth rates, mounting financial debts, very fast aging society due to the one-child family, and so on and so on. But now, these important problems and many others, including also the digitalization of society, are sidelined by the actual problem. We are now living in changing and very fluent times. The last 2 years we discussed, as you know, the question of the digital dictatorship, the social credit surveillance systems, the punishments and bonuses, the overall virtual control that China has implemented. And after 6 years of experimenting since 2014, actually this year, it should be put into, so it's very actual. But now there are other problems sidelining it. And we even don't hear any more about the very actual problems we discussed last year, like Xinjiang and its labor re-education camps for around 1 million Uyghur minority population. We don't discuss much more in the moment about what's going on in Tibet. We don't speak much about human rights abuses, which were so important last year. But all these important items are because of this escalating Cold War with the United States on all subjects, not only on press freedom and journalists, on everything. And I have to mention, the United States also is in big trouble. More than 100,000 deaths connected to the Corona is one side of the coin. The other is the social tensions, because 40 million people in the United States have lost their jobs. And now we are in the midst of an explosion of racial violence triggered by the brutal death of African-American George Floyd. And the violence is spreading already to many cities. This is just as we talk now, is the situation in the States. And but now, in the midst of all this, there's the Hong Kong crisis, which is bringing new changes. And about the new enforced security law, that was the headlines of news in the last days, by Beijing leadership, which contradicts and violates the one country, two system praxis. Yesterday nighttime, Donald Trump announced with tough rhetoric 5 new measures against China. He wants to eliminate special treatment for Hong Kong. He will sanction Beijing officials who are involved in the Hong Kong situation. He is terminating the US membership of the World Health Organization, WHO, and responsible, which he said is responsible for helping China to cover the pandemic. He wants to kick out US-listed PRC firms from NASDAQ, and these are all the firms which is high technology firms. He will start restricting some Chinese students, around 3,000, which comes from military institutions or connected universities in China, which are not more allowed to study in the United States. and the fate of the famous trade deal between China and the US is in limbo. So the reaction, as far as I know now, and we have someone from China who can tell us a little bit more maybe, is mixed up. The propaganda, of course, is playing a strong nationalist mood, but on many websites, insecurity and doubts, despite the official nationalist mood, you can hear it and you can read it, and we follow that up. We have a lot of WeChat contacts and we see what's going on. And a lot of young Chinese fear that they have no more way to go to foreign countries and other things like that. But there's one thing is clear, and that is for the majority of observers, to put it in one sentence. Xi Jinping's China, emboldened by its handling of the coronavirus pandemic, no longer seems constrained by the threat of international rebuke. So what we are now have a tense situation, which is, as I said, fluent, and we don't know what's going to be developed. So it could be connected to the Taiwan question, which comes now again to the questions, the South China Sea, which is a very troublesome place. And all these things are potentially very dangerous for the world peace. And this I want to put as a starter for the discussion about the digital and other questions that I am ready to talk and other people are ready to talk. So I have to have an overall background because I think the actual thing is very important. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for this overall view. It was quite interesting. And so just to get a personal view, maybe I'll ask the first question to Max. So thanks for coming again. How are you, and can you describe the evolution of the crisis from your point of view? Like, could you compare your life before, during, and after Corona? So what has changed?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me, by the way. So I've been here in Shanghai for like almost 10 months now. I came here in September last year. And during the new year, I went back to Munich, and right before Corona, I came back to Shanghai. So, like just a week after the whole thing started, and yeah, we basically had to stay in our rooms, can't go out. Everything was shut down, and there was nothing happening basically. I think, yeah, so pretty similar to Germany or Europe right now. I think they're opening up again too, right? But yeah, that kept for long, I think like 2 weeks or something, and then they open up shortly after that. Yeah, it was still, because I was planning to travel, so that was playing into my plans a little bit, but it was fine, I guess. Yeah. Right now it's still like you still feel it, of course, but it seems pretty normal. Everybody wears a mask. You get checked, like your temperature gets measured basically everywhere, and you have a QR code, a health code, it's called, that you have to show everywhere. That otherwise you cannot go into any basically any building, and it's basically a code that has a color, and if you are near another person that is yeah, that has corona or has a red code, it changes basically. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what should I say? I don't know. It's just, I think during Corona I felt pretty much the same way you all guys feel right now. Just annoyed and yeah, I don't know. Just also annoyed about other people, especially a lot of Shanghai citizens that were really paranoid, because especially as a foreigner, you felt a little bit like all the eyes were on you, because especially in a time when China closed the borders, everybody thought, oh, you're a foreigner, you could have corona and stuff like that. So there was like a racial thing for some time, but I think you just had to accept it and get through it. And now the situation is pretty much normal. You can Chinese government said you can travel again. For me personally, it's still not really sure, because my university is saying that, or the university is recommending me that I cannot travel, or I should not travel. But it's pretty chaotic there, so I don't really know. So I'm just sitting here, and yeah, don't have any definite answers what I can do right now. So yeah, I think I just have to wait, I guess. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I think it's a challenging time for all of us, like everywhere you are in Europe or in China or in the USA. It's quite hard because we're all affected by this. And so I've already seen some questions in the chat. That's so great. Thanks a lot. And the first one is to you, Mr. Ehrling. Does China deserve praise or blame for its handling of the crisis? And maybe I can just add, like, should we take them as a role model, or should we go in the other direction?
Yeah, that's a question which is much discussed, and we have no clear understanding how the virus really developed in the pandemic and what was China's role in it. We know that there were a lot of mistakes done in the first phase, and a lot of things that China now has to clear up, but it doesn't. And we know that Chinese leadership was censoring all memory discussions, censoring all going back discussions about its role, and that makes it very, very difficult. Now even it tried to put itself as a sort of a victor of everything, that it has changed the mood. And actually, in my understanding, China is often called the kingdom of amnesia, and this is because it doesn't allow its people to discuss and to understand what really is going on, and never goes back to try to find where are the mistakes. There's a lot of misunderstanding about saying that China, for example, put that virus worldwide, which I think is stupid, but that it didn't be transparent on it, that it tried to put down all information at the start, was doing everything, was doing the situation worse. So we have to go back. It's very important to understand that. And I say that also because in 2002 and 2003, I covered SARS, and it was the same procedure. China has nothing learned from that time. The first months and weeks, it was put down, it was not discussed, and then they had to discuss, and then they came out, and then they declared themselves the victor of it. But this time, this is very problematic, and I think it will still take time, but I think everything will come out.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And so there are two more questions, I think, also to Ehrling. Like the next one is, will COVID-19 and mounting tensions between the USA and China make isolationism the new norm? Or do you think there can be a go back?
I think that's also a question. Max should have some experience in that. Nationalism is a very difficult situation in China. It could be easily put on and easily put out. The question is, in the moment you find it as an oversealed patriotism, And it could be very dangerous. I think in the future, the question of nationalism, I wouldn't say up to now it's really cooked up, but it started to be cooked up. There are people like a very famous author in Wuhan, which I have read her diary. She was a hero in the first 2-3 weeks of the pandemic when everyone is, her name is Fang Fang, when everyone read her diary. And now she's treated as a traitor because she openly discussed in her diary, and everyone was reading it. She openly discussed the situation. What is the situation in Wuhan? What's going on? What are people feeling? And to not allow, even in a virtual era, in a digital era, to not allow people to discuss freely about the things, put up things like nationalism. And now, of course, there comes the United States factor, the Hong Kong factor, the Taiwan factor, everything. So it's easy to put up a lot of things and a lot of, but I think the majority of Chinese people are quite experienced, especially older people. They're experienced in this up and down, and I think they're still very rational. But I don't know what Max is thinking on all that.
Yeah, so maybe Max, can you give your opinion? There's also the question, like, how are you perceived in China as a European now, that the virus is mainly in Europe and the US? So do you already mentioned you feel like there's a change, and do you feel that there is a nationalism really, or a isolation?
You mean in China specifically? I think, yeah, I think especially when China said that they were closing the borders, it seemed like they're closing up their country to the whole world, basically. So now it's getting to, yeah, it feels normal again because obviously the borders are closed, and you can travel now because China says, okay, everybody's in, nobody can go out, or can go out but never cannot go in anymore. You can do basically everything what you want. I don't know, it feels a little bit like the problem shifted from China to Europe and the whole world. And I think the Chinese government, or what I heard is, or what you hear here is no news about COVID-19 anymore. The problem, like nothing basically. So it's, of course, you see everybody in masks and you get checked everywhere, but it's not a theme basically. It's not a problem. I only hear it from friends and family outside of China, and it seems like it's only a problem in Europe and America and everywhere else. But in the end, I think there are still huge problems here. I can't imagine that that here is everything solved. But I don't know. It's difficult to see through, kind of. That's yeah, it's my opinion, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have another question for Mr. Ehrling, I think it is, from Istanbul, Turkey, which is, do you expect huge law issues for China after the coronavirus process is over?
What is meant by law issues?
I'm not 100% sure. Maybe the person can specify it.
So just write in the chat, or you can also
Yeah.
say it.
Exactly.
Okay, can I speak?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, hi, thank you very much. My question is generally based on the United States suing China about what's going on. So do you think it will be general, for example, every country, especially who face this trouble more, Do you think they sue China or not?
Oh, okay, I understand. I understand. Yeah. Okay. No, this is something. This is a sideline problem. I mean, they were suing China in the way like if there were some suspicion that China was releasing this virus to a laboratory or other things, and if you would find really some clues for that this is true and this is not a development of a virus by natural causes, and then you could maybe sue some institutions or others for the economic losses and everything like that. But up to now, I think this is the most experts say this is impossible and it will not come. The problem is not the suing. The problem is, why didn't they release the information on time? Why didn't they put a discussion now on why about the whole situation? They just go over it, and like Max said, it looks like it never has been there in China. No? It was something very far again. It's just only a week ago that they opened up again. So the question is against transparency and discussion and everything, making clear what is the responsibility of China and what else is. I just mentioned this author Fan. What is her problem? Her main problem in the eyes of the Chinese government is that she asked for the responsibility. She asked, why is China not discussing about who is responsible for what and not, for what not to do? And you know that a pandemic like we experience now, it's very important to be very early. If you're very early, you can put it into certain, you can control it in a certain way. If you're too late, then things are moving so quickly. We saw that in Italy, we saw that everywhere. And we saw that also in the United States, because the United States also were late. If they would have done that 4 weeks ago, it would not been 100,000 dead. And China also, of course, was late, and China was starting with it. So this is not a question of financial loss and about of being sued. It's a question of a moral responsibility and scientific responsibility to put out everything on the table and make clear what's going on.
Yeah, I totally agree with Johnny Ehrling about that. I think from what you heard here, especially in the beginning of COVID-19 in China, was first, I think the government tried to sell their strategy as, okay, we learned out of the last pandemic and we wanted to do it very like now the right way. But I think just a week later there were a lot of rumors about false numbers. And there was this case about this one doctor that died, and he apparently predicted the virus pretty early, and told on social media that it has to be acted and stuff like that. So there was a lot of criticism in social media and everywhere about false numbers and so on. And I think, yeah, they still did it too late. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I hope this question is answered now. We have 2 more questions concerning the US-China-EU relations. And so one of them is, what does the confrontation between the US and China mean for the European Union? And do you think that the perceived botched handling of the COVID-19 pandemic by China might negatively affect EU-China relations in the long term?
That's probably a question directed to me. Yeah, okay.
I think so.
I think, yeah, this is very interesting because it's just happening now, and after it's clear what the position of the United States is. It's more or less clear what the position of Great Britain is. and Australia criticizing China and doing a very confrontative position. Europe is just wavering now in between. There will be the G7 meeting in end of June in Washington. Angela Merkel from Germany already said she will not go personally there, but she will be going online. And there will be, of course, a discussion of everyone together what to do with this situation with China now and what is the. And Europe is in a big discussion about its China strategy. Europe was very naive many years in connecting with China. Now it wants to be on terms in China, but on realistic terms and not more on idealistic terms. And so it will be very critical in some aspect, but it will not go so far as the United States, who wants to put sanctions against China. So Europe is in between. And the next thing which will be very much on attention to see is September. Then there is a big Europe-China summit, into which Mr. Xi Jinping, the president of China, is coming to Leipzig. And Germany is leading this discussion because Germany now is the EU president for the turnus of half a year. Germany has the so-called presidentship of Europe. So Germany is inviting. Mr. Xi is coming, and all the other countries of the European will be there. And there will be a discussion about how to deal with China. And it will be a discussion if there will be a big contract with China on investments and other things. It will be a discussion about the 5G question, which is also a question which we discussed today on the telecommunication. And it will be also a discussion on Hong Kong, which China doesn't want to see and to hear. So it will be a big question for Europe how to position itself. It doesn't want to position itself so critical as the Americans are. But on the other side, it doesn't want to be played by China against the United States.
Yes, thanks for your answer. It's quite interesting. And we had an answer in the chat, which is concerning Max. I don't know if you're reading a local newspaper. So maybe, because the question is about how are narratives on pandemic and China, US, and India and Taiwan tensions presented in local Chinese media. So if you know anything about it, just go for it. If not, it's not a problem. You're not speaking Chinese like fluently, so it's okay.
To be completely honest, you don't get a lot of media here in China, or I don't have a TV in my apartment or anything like that. So since I'm China, I don't see a lot of news actually. That's I didn't get any information about the tensions between US, Taiwan, India, and so on. It seems, or because maybe I don't speak Chinese, I guess, and I mean I have on my phone I have like or a friend of mine has on his phone, he has China Daily, but that's a very propagandic newspaper that supports the Chinese government, of course. So it's all about pro-China, basically.
Yeah.
I read Chinese newspapers, and I read also the chats and everything. Of course, it's the narrative is now very clear, dominated by the government. The censorship is very strong, so it's one direction, one news. There is no big discussion about that, what we just mentioned before, about responsibility and everything else. And different voices are just silenced. The Chinese have a very good control mechanism, even for all internet chats and everything. Everything is controllable and will be controlled, and people, especially, I spoke about the American journalists and other journalists who have problems, but of course the biggest problem have the Chinese journalists, which try to open up some discussions or try to find out things. But the narrative is clear, and if the readers or if your public people are interested, we have to put then concrete questions. What is the narrative? But it's clear against Hong Kong. It's clear against Taiwan, very strongly against Taiwan. Now they even try to remember the 1958 bombardment of Taiwan that they did in Quemoy, which is called Xinmen. So it's starting again in commemoration, and it's a sort of threat to Taiwan that China is ready and able and could use military means to solve this question of reunification. So it's a very tense situation, and let's see how these things are developing. And we just see it is a day-to-day situation at the moment.
All right, thank you very much. So we have another question, I think, also to Mr. Ehrling about the economy in China. And this is, how did the citizens react to the missing growth target announced in the National People's Congress? And how is the economic expectation?
Well, the growth target was not mentioned this time for the first time since 20 and more years. The People's Congress doesn't give a growth target, but it gave other targets. It gave targets about the debts. The debts will be put up from 2.8% last year to 3.6%, which is something like $1 billion yuan more. This means 3% is a so-called red. We should not go over 3%, but everyone is now going over, because China has to put a lot of money into the government, into the economy, for making good the losses that they had. So Premier Li Keqiang, sorry, I just mentioned his name. He was giving a speech to the People's Congress some days ago, and he said that China will not do the same than it did 2008, put a very much lot of money into the economy and then in infrastructure and other things, and then produces a lot of debts. But actually China does it. And Li Keqiang also gave numbers. They will go down with taxes and everything. So they will put around 6 billion yuan, 6,000 billion, sorry, 6,000 billion yuan. They will put into the economy with different methods to keep it running, because it goes down. In the first quarter this year, it went down for the first time since ever they counted, for nearly 7%, which is very big, going down. There's, as I said, around 70 million peasant workers, and altogether maybe 100 million people are having no jobs, which had jobs before. So this is a big pressure on the Chinese economy. And they will redirect their investment. So the economy is going on again since 1 month, but it's going slow. There is no demand. The demand is less than they expected. And there is no international demand, because we have everywhere the pandemic. So it blocks logistics, it blocks demands, it blocks everything. So there is a lot of problems. And if there is the listeners of this session here are having more concrete questions, they should put it concretely. We can answer that. That's not a problem. Thank you.
Yeah, there's one more question regarding the Hong Kong situation. If sanctions are off table, what kind of measures could the EU take at all?
Well, the EU has a lot of measures possible. There is one thing is what the EU is doing to care about the Hong Kong situation, because China has broken its promises. China's promises was Hong Kong is a part of China, but it will keep its social and political and justice systems for the next 50 years. So it was in 1997. And now the Chinese government is putting up the question of security and will even put its police, some parts of its police, especially the secret police, into into Hong Kong, and can influence the situations there. And this is something, a big threat. So the European can discuss it, can put it on the table when it discusses with what China wants from it. So when it gives it could put the discussion really hard. And that is something what China will hear to, because it needs the European Union. It needs the economic exchange with the European Union, which is actually as big as with the United States. And it needs the technology transfer from the European Union and a lot of other things. So European Union has a lot of options as long as it is united. And China has tried to split the European Union in the East European, South European, Southeastern European Union, which has special relation to China, and West European Union. And so European Union has to be decisive, has to be united, and it has to be also find a common question how far it is dependent on telecommunication with China, especially with companies like Huawei and the 5G question. So there's a lot of options if the Union is discussing it and if it's ready to do something together and not against everyone. No?
So maybe one last question, because it's like I'm quite interesting. Various conspiracy theories on the subject of the corona crisis have been circulating. What is your assessment of this? Like there are a lot of, like, I don't know, like I will say fake news, which are saying, yeah, the Chinese government just created these virus and all these kind of things. And so do you think that these theories can have an impact on the international scene and the relations between the countries?
There was the demand from start on that China is allowing and also organizing and helping with an international investigation. It didn't do up to now, China, but this is important because it's still not very clear how this virus was really coming out. We know it was being very much, it didn't start, but it developed in a fish market, in a wild meat and fish market in Wuhan. But actually, that was not the starting point. That was the distributing point. The question was how did it start? And now they come to some ideas. There's a lot of scientific ideas saying it came via a bat. A bat is an animal that is having this virus already, and then it was transforming from that bat to another animal and became over to man, and then it was becoming really dangerous. So the question was that putting up all these conspiracy theories that you have some laboratories in the near Wuhan, which are especially highly technicized and very important laboratories for this sort of viruses and virus research. So people were saying, oh, okay, this came from that laboratory. But the majority of science, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a virologist, but I only can read all these newspapers and all these magazines and all these scientific magazines. The majority of people don't think it is man-made. That's the first thing, which is this stupid rumor. The other thing is, did they experiment with that virus and it escaped? That question is still there, but people tend not to believe the most, but it's still not definitely answered. It has to be researched. And the third thing is, where did it come from? Did it come from through a so-called spender, or someone who got the virus and then brought it to the fish market by accident, by chance, and then it was gone? Or did it develop? It's clear that it started from Wuhan in the mass. That's clear. The question is, how did it come? how did it develop from a single virus to an epidemic? And then the next question would be to ask, how did this epidemic develop to a pandemic? And why didn't, what the role of the WHO in that? What's the role of the Chinese scientists and everything? So a lot of questions which only needs to be transparent and allow an investigation with scientists, and then we will get an answer. But as long as this is not transparent, the rumors will spread and will not go down.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your time to both of you. It was a pleasure talking to you and to have this discussion. Also, thank you, Antonio, for the co-moderation. And thanks to all the participants. It was so nice having you here. And it was a lot of work to do this webinar all together, like our 3 sections, but I think it was worth it. Like, I hope so, and I hope you think so too. And it would be great if you could just give us a quick feedback. And if you have further questions, you can always ask us, as we already said. So normally we have a, yeah, okay, you see the survey already. So just give a quick feedback, and would be nice so we can improve our next webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure also on my side.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me too.
And while everybody is filling the quick survey, I can see the numbers coming in. You can also mentally prepare for our group picture, which is obviously obligatory, even with the Zoom call. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else is as nerdy as myself with a flag next to their desk or something, but if you have something particular, oh, some people are getting up and getting their flags, then get your flag or whatever you want to show, so we can have a quick group picture. And if you don't want to be in the picture, obviously that's fine. Just switch off your camera. And for everybody who is happy to be in the picture, please switch on your camera, because at the moment, as we asked you to do it, most of you switched it off. But this is now the part where we can all sort of be visible in the room. And I can see a turnout of 83%. So I'm going to keep it open for a few more seconds, and then we're going to end the polling. And I'm going to end the polling and reveal the results. And we're going to look at the feedback in detail, but you can also look at it right now with all with transparency in mind. And yeah, we will also be in touch with you via email with the Google form. Those of you who are really keen on filling it right now, there is the Google form here, which you are welcome to fill in, because it gives a bit of a more detailed overview and feedback rather than just those questions. So this is more of an instantaneous response. But please do take that seriously, and please do take the time to fill it in, because it really helps us. And now, as I said, it's time for the group picture. I can see that a few got the cameras on and the flags there. Yeah, for anyone who is still missing, if you want to join us, do so now. And I'm going to take my phone and weirdly take a picture of myself. And everybody else obviously can do the same. So yeah, Cecile or Mara, if you also would like to take a picture, do so.
Yeah, so just a print screen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, screenshot. Yeah. Okay, cool. Everybody done? Then this is really the wrap-up point for us. A massive thank you to Mara once again. For those who joined later, this was Mara's idea to come up with this whole online event and webinar. So thank you for bringing that forward and for contacting myself and Cecile. And thank you all for joining. I changed one question in the feedback form where I wanted to find out where you're all joining from, because I figured we not only have Ukraine here, we even have Australia represented today, which was quite extreme. And then obviously China as well with Max and so on. So it's really, really international. So thank you, Cecile. for co-organizing. Thank you, Mara, for the idea and the co-organizing. Thank you also to the Neue Europäische Bewegung Schweiz, the new European movement Switzerland, because we are actually using their room here today, their Zoom account. So that's really kind. Yes, thank you very much. And we're going to wrap up today with something very European and cheesy. It's going to be the European anthem. But before that, if you can quickly show the contact options again, the contact social media handles, Mara,
Yes.
so that people can take a note of that if you are not familiar with JEF yet. So if you want to take a brief picture, we are all represented on Facebook, and we are also, most of us are also represented on Twitter, and yeah, Google search. Oh, not a Google search. I'm sorry. Another service, like for example Ecosia or something else that you can use. And this is it for today, and now we're going to hear the European anthem. If I can get my screen to be shared, for which I think Mara, you would need to.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So optimize the sound. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice weekend. Enjoy and see you again soon. I hope so. Stay healthy, stay European, and thanks also to Julius and Cecile for doing this with me.
Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. Thank you, Julius and Mara, for this amazing organization.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.